In August 1944, a group of American officers flew deep into northwest China to Yunnan. The communists wanted to create a good impression, for they wanted American help in the immediate struggle against Japan, and they hoped for long-term support when the war was over. The American officers spent a year in Yunnan assessing the communists' organization and their military potential. Apart from a few Russian advisors, they saw no evidence of Soviet support. With full U.S. government approval, the Americans instructed the communists on strategy and weaponry. They watched guerrilla tactics. They traveled out from Yunnan and watched the communists attack Japanese blockhouses. They saw that the communists controlled huge areas in the countryside of North and Central China. Patrick Hurley, President Roosevelt's personal representative, visited. His mission was to mediate between Chiang and the communists.
China was a very complex phenomenon, and it really baffled him, I think. He had great difficulty with identifying who the various Chinese were. He had, Mao Zedong was Mustang, and the nicknames that grew up there in an attempt to identify people.
Despite cordial appearances, Hurley's mediation went badly and led to deep communist mistrust of him. Hurley supported Chiang Kai-shek and did not seem to take the communists seriously. The Foreign Service officers made a different assessment.
I reported on the communists after my visit there that I thought that they would probably win in China. And the reason I think that that would happen is that they had popular support. I mentioned, I think at the time, that they were a democratic force, that they were a popular force, and they had a popular support. And only in that sense were they democratic.
In August 1945, the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, and the Japanese surrendered. In the victory celebrations, Chiang was the hero of China. The communists raced to get their armies north. Nationalist troops were airlifted by America to arrive first. Civil war seemed inevitable. Patrick Hurley, now U.S. ambassador in China, persuaded Mao to go to Chongqing for talks with Chiang. The two men had not met in nearly 20 years, since the days of Sun Yat-sen in Canton. Chiang addressed Mao as elder brother, and Mao made the toast, "Long live Chiang Kai-shek." But the talks led nowhere. President Truman did not give up. He sent General George Marshall to mediate. An agreement was signed, and then quickly broke down. In October 1949, the Chinese people celebrated the victory of the Communist Party. The leader of the communists and the hero of the revolution was Mao Zedong. For Mao and the Chinese Communist Party, taking power was just a first step. The real revolution was about to begin. They wanted to transform the lives of 1/4 of mankind and create a strong and modern industrial China. The United States did not recognize Mao's government. Only months after this speech, the two sides would be at war in Korea.
The original orders that we gave MacArthur were, when he's able to do so, to expel the North from the South. And in doing so, to keep well clear of the Chinese borders, because we did not want to give them any pretext to come in.
But MacArthur's troops continued north, towards the Yalu River and the border with China.
MacArthur had much broader objectives: to take advantage of the attack, to attack China, and remove Chinese communists as a threat in the area. And he is continually trying to do things that would bring China into the war.
Mao's government was barely a year old and in the midst of radical reforms. It could hardly afford a war, but Mao felt the UN forces were an intolerable threat to China's security. Under the command of General Peng Dehuai, 250,000 Chinese troops secretly crossed into Korea. At the end of October 1950, they attacked, taking the UN forces completely by surprise. The UN troops soon fled in a massive retreat. By the spring of 1951, the war was a grim stalemate. Both sides were dug in around the 38th parallel, separating North and South Korea. While fighting continued, peace talks began. Finally, after 2 years, the talks produced an armistice.
The Korean War forced us to recognize, and the American people to recognize, that the new regime, the communist regime in China, was a fact of life with whom we were going to have to live.
In February 1972, after months of secret negotiations, President Richard Nixon arrived in Beijing to begin a new relationship with China.
Nixon saw two major advantages to this improved relationship with China. First, I think Nixon always saw the relationship on its own merit. The other involved the major Soviet role in Southeast Asia. Hanoi was a proxy of the Soviet Union.
I remember that Mao said to Nixon, "After our two countries resume diplomatic relations, we will still have to curse you a little in our newspapers."
We expected and frequently received diatribes for public consumption, both in the press and in the diplomacy itself. The careful issue was not to be carried away by this and overly offended by it as we attempted to achieve a greater outcome.
The joint communique which we have issued today will make headlines around the world tomorrow.
这个公报啊，将是明天全世界的头条新闻。
But what we have said in that communique is not nearly as important as what we will do in the years ahead to build a bridge across 16,000 miles and 22 years of hostility which have divided us in the past.
Nixon's visit signaled China's opening to the world. Gradually, China would become an active player in world politics.